that was a much more comfortable win than the Espanyol one at the weekend. And you could see Materazzo's side are really struggling to find their feet early on in this season.
Yeah, difficult opening for them. 2 losses back-to-back now, opening day against Betis as well. Luis, one of the good things for Real Madrid today as well is that we saw Vini, Mbappe and Jude Bellingham all combining to get the goals.
Yeah, exactly. You know, having a laugh of enjoying. I think they played a very good game in the second half. The first 45, they were a bit more struggling on the build-up. And let's not forget, we've been talking a lot about this Real Madrid, the needs of someone in the middle to bring the ball in good condition to the players up front. That they are, of course, clinical. We saw today Kylian Mbappe, but also Vinicius Junior was very a big threat in the second 45 minutes. So overall, I think it's a very good win, a good test against Real Sociedad. That another year they're gonna be depending on Oyarzabal, no players up front who can score goals. And Real Madrid showed that not only the ones who started the 11, but also the replacement. Once again, Ibrahim Diaz, SP in the second half, and also Cucurella can bring something different. So the depth into the squad gets there. I think that is still missing a few players if they want to challenge for LALIGA and of course Champions League. But definitely today we saw a good Real Madrid for most of the game, and of course the result is a fantastic one to keep on going on this season.
Let's elaborate on that Jude Bellingham point that you made, continuing that form that we saw from him in the World Cup. We saw him in the opening game looking good, and once again today, Craig.
He looks really strong, comfortable. Now, Kylian Mbappe gets a hat-trick, man of the match. He'll get the headlines, could have had 4 or 5. But I do think the introduction of Cucurella at left-back just gave them an impetus, and I think he'll be a big plus point for Vinicius Junior, because he hasn't really had somebody that's continually want to overlap and support him and help him in that position, and he'll get that from Cucurella. So when Cucurella, sometimes you want a wide player to be left on his own, one-on-one, but other times you want that full-back overlapping and busting a gut to give you that option to come inside or to take an extra defender away, because quite often Vinny Junior, like a lot of top players, gets doubled up on. You know, he has 2 players to beat, and when you have a Cucurella getting down the outside, that can open up the game for you and open up the space. So that's a big plus point for them. But they have taken advantage, I don't think there's any doubt, of a side in Real Sociedad that are waiting for players to come back. They haven't started the season well. They lost almost every pre-season game they played. I think it was 5 games. They lost every one of them. So they're not in great form. But in terms of Jose Mourinho coming back in to Real Madrid, it's 2 wins. It was much more comfortable tonight. And even if there was a few whistles in the first half, after about 35 minutes or so, because they were a little frustrated, what we saw in the second half was more of, I think, what Mourinho will expect going forward. And of course, they've got some players still to come back in. He's still trying to figure things out. But it was a much more accomplished 45 minutes in the second half, hence the scoreline.
Fantastic game today, 3 goals, and I'm sure that it looks sharp as always, and numbers are right there, and I'm expecting the best of him this season.
I think one of the big things for Mourinho and all his experience and all his nous, getting this opportunity, which is really a surprise, getting this job off the back of the Alonso and Arbeloa, is that, yeah, he's getting some new players in and he has to find the right balance, and they have to challenge Barcelona, who've been the best team in Spain the last couple of seasons, bar none. I mean, it's not even been close. And they've started their season particularly well. Is one of the things that Mourinho has to do, amongst all the tactical stuff, is do what, unfortunately, Alonso couldn't do, is get everybody on the same page. Unfortunately, they were not. They're moaning about training. He was moaning about game time. This one was moaning about this, that, and the next thing. He has to make sure that he'll have these little issues throughout a season, but he has to make sure, if they are going to challenge Barca all the way, that everyone has to be on the same page, that everybody has to realise it's not just about them. Yeah, there'll be star players, there'll be hat-tricks for Mbappe and stuff like that. Vinicius Junior will have his day, Bellingham will have his day. It's about sharing the load. If he can do that and convince these egos that, you know, it's all about the bigger story, they've got a chance. But if they fall back into, if they got a couple of bad results and they fall back into the blame game, which is where they were last year, it's everybody else's fault, it's not mine, then they won't go the full season. So that's the biggest task ahead, I think, for the manager going back in. And listen, he's got the experience to do that. But it's when that bad result happens and comes along, is whether he can keep everybody on that, you know, even keel. That's going to be the big question at Real Madrid.
So there's that potential move for Enzo Fernandez from Chelsea to Man City before the summer transfer window closes, and that's what we're seeing in the papers in England. It ends with us and fight to the ends. Very easy, pun for them there. But lots to talk about, which is why we are welcoming in our senior football writer for ESPN, James Ollie. James, what's the latest here? Is he going to stay or is he going to go?
Well, I mean, we've got 4 or 5 days to find out, haven't we? Look, Chelsea have been quite adamant about this. They set a deadline, I think it was August the 14th, where they said, look, 1 week pretty much before the start of the season, the interested clubs have known. I was told they had let the clubs know for 60 days. That was the time frame they said they'd given interested clubs to table the bid, and they were quite open about the price. They said £120 million gets you Enzo Fernandez. These are the terms we want. If anyone meets it, he can go. Nobody did that, of course, and Manchester City had a lot of business to do themselves. They've had a very busy summer. Obviously, they've had a change of manager, and an icon leaving in Pep Guardiola too. So there's been quite a lot of upheaval there. Chelsea tried to draw a line under this before the season started because they didn't want it to bleed into the campaign under Xabi Alonso, but clearly it's going to. And the major advantage that Manchester City have in this equation is, as ever in these, when they tend to get left this late, is the player wants the move. So it's going to come down to Chelsea really whether they're willing to accept a player who does not want to be there, and they'll try and convince him to stay into January and then next summer, and they feel that they can reintegrate him successfully into the squad, or whether they cut their losses and they say, if City make a bid at that level, and they say, actually, we'll go back on our word and we'll take the money with no time, obviously, to sign a replacement.
And where does Xabi Alonso sit in this, James? Is he? I don't know if you know this, but is he a big fan of Enzo Fernandez, or is he saying if we get the right money, then we can? Do you think? I mean, do you even think at this late stage, if that was to happen, that they would have a replacement for him?
I think Xabi Alonso's actually been really interesting publicly about this, which is to sort of say it got stuck on him, I think, right on the first press conference. Do you want Enzo Fernandez to stay? And he just answered yes, and there wasn't really an elaboration. There wasn't a kind of public courting of him and a talking up the player's ability and how much he wants to work with him, and he's one of the reasons I came in and all that kind of stuff. It was just yes. I think what Xabi Alonso's been really keen on behind the scenes is to really improve the culture of that dressing room, and they felt it's been quite fractured in the past. It's been too big for too long. They've had too many players. It's been very difficult to keep everyone on the same page. And I think what he said to Enzo Fernandez, as he said to really the whole group, is if you want to be here, and certainly to someone with Enzo Fernandez's ability, if you want to be here, then we want to make the best of you. We know if everyone's picking their best 11 at the moment with Chelsea and everybody's fit, Enzo Fernandez gets in it. And Xabi Alonso's not about to give up a player of that talent just sort of on a whim. I think he just knows that if that player does not want to be fully invested, and Enzo Fernandez is quite a volatile character, we've seen that quite clearly at the World Cup. He's had his problems at Chelsea in the past. He obviously was dropped last season by Liam Rossini when he was quite public about flirting with moves. All right, he didn't specifically name Real Madrid, but I think he talked about how much he liked Madrid in an interview. And with ESPN Argentina, seconds after they went out of the Champions League, he was asked about whether he'd be there next season, and he said, I don't know. I mean, he knows what he's doing. He's sowing those seeds of uncertainty. And I think there's part of Alonso that thinks, I don't need this. I don't need a character like this when I've got, remember, a game a week. They don't have European football. They can't keep a big squad happy. He needs to strip that squad down, and assuming that everybody stays fit, he'll be picking the same 15, 18 players, won't he, most weeks, to actually come on and play in those games. So he needs everybody fully invested in that. I think what Chelsea have been doing to some extent is protecting their asset value. They, as I say, placed this price tag at 120 million very early on in the summer. And I think by kind of making this public sort of statement of we've drawn a line under it, that's it, you're sort of saying to Manchester City, look, if you are going to come late, don't mess us about. You know what the valuation is. They paid £107 million for him a couple of years ago. His price objectively has probably gone up in that time. He's obviously had success with Argentina. He's got to another World Cup final and been a very influential player for Chelsea. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. I think Alonso will be content if he stays, assuming that they're convinced he will knuckle down. But I think if Enzo Fernandez really pushes for this deal in the final 4 or 5 days, I think it'll happen.
I mean, Xabi Alonso I suppose when you go into any job, it's never a perfect scenario, but he really needs to go into a place that, as James mentioned there, that everybody, and we were talking about it with Real Madrid, that everybody's on the same page, because he's just come out of a dressing room that was problematic, that was throwing him under the bus, that was talking about his training, that was about certain egos who thought they were more powerful than the manager, and he just can't have that at Chelsea. Now, it's not an ideal scenario, particularly as a new manager going in, but they have their issues if you watch the Fulham game. But one of the plus points was they've got Morgan Rogers. Cole Palmer looks as if he's got the bit between his teeth again, and João Pedro's a very good player. So even though Enzo Fernandez is a little bit deeper in terms of a midfielder, there's a lot of plus points from the game at Craven Cottage. There's some worrying issues as well. But I think if the player ultimately, and we'll get to Julian Alvarez, because that's a mess later on in the show. Ultimately, when a player wants to go, it's very difficult then to play the bluff game, and all right, you're keeping the player within the squad, but you're basically keeping an unhappy player that doesn't want to be there. And no player really in that mindset is ever going to be the player that he's never going to be able to play as well as his ability would let him, because subconsciously the player's annoyed that he didn't get his move. So you're not getting a player who's unprofessional, but you're certainly not going to get a player who's at the top of his game. And that is the concern. It's the whole player power thing. And it's the finances and the player power and the struggles that go within all these moves and the agents behind the scenes that I think make this job so difficult at times.
That's why we do keep hearing the name Emi Martinez linked with a move to Chelsea. What's the latest here, James?
Yeah, I think this is an interesting one, because there's another part of this equation, which is Mike Penders, the goalkeeper that they had at Strasbourg, who's come in this season, and I've been told that they view him very highly, and they see him as being a future number one at Stamford Bridge quite soon, in fact. But whether it's quite this early on, I'm not so sure. He's only 21. He's not played a lot of top-level football, and it would be a huge ask, really, to say you're now going to be the number one after Robert Sanchez has started the season so disappointingly. So Emi Martinez is an interesting one. I think he's been offered to Chelsea rather than Chelsea have gone and actually looked at options. I think everybody could see what happened at Craven Cottage. It's not the first time there have been question marks about Robert Sanchez. I think it's pretty clear that if you're going to try and, I don't think anybody's thinking Chelsea are going to win the league, but if you're going to go and push to try and win the league, get into the Champions League, I'm not sure Robert Sanchez is your goalkeeper who's going to do that. So there is an opportunity there to upgrade the squad and improve the starting 11. Emi Martinez, what is he, 34, big personality. It makes sense. It's a sort of 2+2 situation, isn't it? He clearly, his Villa future is very uncertain. Chelsea have a short-term problem. They could probably find some kind of compromise where he comes in for the season, or maybe they give him a 2-year deal and they review it next summer. But they've been very clear behind the scenes that they really see Mike Penders as being somebody who can come in and establish himself. And they've really got a judgment call to make now. Do they trust a 21-year-old goalkeeper? Do they persevere with Robert Sanchez? Do they think actually this is a bit of a one-off? I mean, it's not, but maybe they think it's a one-off at the start of the season. Let's see where we are in 6-8 weeks' time, and maybe Penders with some more training. Maybe he works with the coaching staff. Obviously, with Xabi Alonso, who's only just gone in there. Maybe they think actually he could be ready. But it's just all come at the wrong time. I think if this had been a year later, I don't think Chelsea would even be thinking about signing another goalkeeper. I think they'd probably be giving Penders a go, but it would be a big call to put him in now at this stage of his career.
I know which option I wouldn't be taking would be the persevering Robert Sanchez.
Well, it wasn't really a glowing endorsement there from James himself.
No.
He said it very politely.
No, because look, he does some really good things, but it's, unfortunately they are all battered away by some of the bad decisions he makes with the ball at his feet, some of the saves that he should make that he lets in. He's a bit of a liability. He wasn't always number one at Brighton. I mean, he wasn't always the number one at Brighton with Jason Steele. So, he's never been, certainly in recent years, the bona fide number one. He just is at the moment at Chelsea because of who they've got as sort of backup goalkeeper. But I think if you want some consistency behind a back four and some confidence behind the back four, it's not Robert Sanchez.
OK, let's talk about Nicolas Jackson right now, joining Aston Villa from Chelsea, agreeing that deal there. And this would see Nico Jackson back up with Unai Emery, who he was with at Villarreal. But there's been some surprise in this move. How's it been taken in England?
Well, I mean, we sort of got wind of this probably the back end of last week that Villa were probably going to sell Ollie Watkins, and therefore they were looking around for alternatives and for replacements. And Nicolas Jackson's name came up as you mentioned there, Kay. The Emery link I think is significant, but also they need somebody who can come in and hit the ground running. And knows the league, which obviously Nicolas Jackson does, and his career is really. I mean, he's had a quite remarkable 12 months, really, when you think about the Bayern move and then Chelsea trying to call it off at the last minute because they got an injury right at the start of the season, and then obviously he stayed there, and it's been. I actually think there's half a player in Nicolas Jackson. I'm not sure he's necessarily right out of the top drawer, but I think he could come in and do a very good job for Villa, and Villa are in that position where, because of the squad cost ratio rules, the financial rules that govern the Premier League teams, they have to do a lot of trading every year. They have to trade quite heavily, and it's a big job for him because that Europa League final squad has been gutted, really. The starting 11 has had the spine kind of ripped out of it when you think about the players that have gone, Konsa and Tielemans and Watkins. So it's a big ask, but it does make a lot of sense. And again, Chelsea have ended up getting a very good fee for a player that they don't want, and they are starting to make a bit of habit of that, I have to say.
Yeah.
I mean, he's again, it's the Unai Emery link. He knows the player, but also he was one of those players, a bit like Marcus Rashford when he got this move to Barcelona. You were like, he's one to watch. And actually, Rashford did pretty well. He didn't get the move that he wanted because Gordon came in and blah, blah, blah. And with Nico Jackson, it was very similar. He's going to Bayern Munich. But actually, he did okay as a backup for Harry Kane, if I'm being honest about it. Now, is like James said, would he be your number one go-to guy for a lot of people? Probably not. But at times he does some good stuff. And Villa are in a position where, they're pretty much selling everything. So Unai Emery needs bodies in there. Now, if we're talking about price tags, there's no point talking about price tags in this day and age because everybody's going for stupid money. It's about getting somebody in that can do a job for you, and the manager knows the player's capabilities. But to be fair to Nicolas Jackson, when he went to Bayern Munich, whenever he was needed, when Harry Kane needed a rest or needed a partner beside him, he wasn't overawed by that, to be fair to him. Now, how he got on at Villa, I don't know. It's just a shame Ollie Watkins, that scenario, going to Saudi Arabia. I get it, it's the money and all that sort of stuff, but you're really taking yourself out of, the Premier League, the global audience, and you're going to, like a lot of these players that are still kind of in their prime, they're going out to Saudi Arabia to get the money, but nobody bats an eyelid. Nobody really bats an eyelid. They could go out there and score 50 goals. Nobody'd bat an eyelid. So it's a bit of a shame from Villa for that perspective, but you have to respect the player if he wants to go and get a big payday.
Yeah, getting back to Chelsea sales though, James, they're doing so well, it seems. Again, pulling these sales off. How are they doing it?
Well, they'll argue it's the contract model, starting that they sign these players on 6, 7, 8, 9-year deals in some cases, and that protects them as an asset value. And without getting too kind of technical about amortization and how sort of the accounting works, it means that what they call the book value of the player. So if you look at the balance sheet today, basically a transfer fee is divided by the length of the contract. So because the contracts are so long, the book value of these players are quite low. So Liam Delap's another really good example. They bought him for 30 million. They've sold him to Forest for, I think it's 45. But his book value would have gone down because he's been there for a year. So actually the profit that they've made in accounting terms, which is the really significant thing with Chelsea, because everyone's going, how are they spending all this money? How do they keep, throwing 117 million at Villa for Morgan Rogers and all that? That's the key figure, really. It's the amortisation that they've been very clever with, and it's why the regulations have changed, where you can now only amortise contracts over a 5-year period rather than the 8 or 9s. But Chelsea, of course, have done that prior to the rule change, so they've got quite a lot of leeway that other clubs didn't have. So that's sort of the nucleus of it. But they've also, Delap is a good example of a player they thought had obvious resale value if it didn't work out. He was young, he's English, he'd had a good season. If at Ipswich Town in the Premier League, if it didn't work out, as it clearly hasn't, then he's still going to maintain a lot of that market value. Now, I think Forest have probably overpaid for him based on what we've seen of him, which I don't mean as any disrespect to him. We don't know how good he can be. He's still a young lad, but I think the market has just taken a jump this summer. I think what's happened with some of the big deals in general, the Elliot Anderson price tag, the Morgan Rogers price tag. I've spoken to some pretty senior recruitment executives who are surprised about the clubs that have been prepared to meet these valuations, because a lot of these valuations have been put on players to ward off clubs, to sort of say, look, we don't want to sell Morgan Rogers, so we think he's worth 117 million, which obviously significantly is 1 million more than Elliot Anderson went for, because he became the kind of benchmark for the summer. And Chelsea went, all right, we'll pay it. And as soon as a club does that, the sort of inflationary effect for everyone else is quite significant. But, as I say, Chelsea have really capitalised on that contractual trick that they pulled off when the new owners came in 4 years ago.
There's said to have been direct talks between Mikel Arteta and the player himself. So what can you tell us about the Arsenal angle on this?
Yeah, so what Arsenal have sort of sat in the corner and just quietly had their hand up while Barca and Atleti have just sort of, have gone at each other over the whole summer. And they've kind of got an ace in the pack here, which is Andrea Berta, the sporting director, because of course he had the same role at Atletico Madrid. He worked there for I think it was 11 or 12 years, and he negotiated the contract that brought Alvarez to Atleti in the first place. So no one knows that contract better than he does. He's obviously got a prior relationship, therefore, with the player and with the player's representatives, and clearly the club itself. So he's quietly been doing the work on this. We actually broke the interest in Alvarez, in Arsenal's interest in Alvarez, back in January. And since then, they've just steadily been in the background trying to play a very sort of delicate role, which is everybody knows Atletico don't want to sell him. And Alvarez has since kind of made it quite clear he wants to go to Barcelona. So you'd think, ostensibly, there's no chance of them doing the deal because the club don't want to sell and the player doesn't necessarily want to go there. But as it's played out, and Barcelona have really riled Atletico, and they've responded so negatively towards them and been so publicly firm about not selling to Barcelona. As I say, Arsenal have just been in the corner in the background with their hand quietly up saying, we're here, we love you, we're happy to pay the market price. My understanding is they are prepared to break their club record fee to try and sign him, which is currently £105 million for Declan Rice. Now, if Alvarez really wants to get out and get out and go anywhere, then it's going to be difficult for Atletico to turn down, 115, 120, 125? I don't know exactly what the price would be, but it would be hard to turn that money down. But Arsenal are in a situation where they need some encouragement in these final few days from either the club or the player to say we can do a deal. Because I think if they get that, this could actually move quite quickly. But from what we're told, Alvarez is quite reluctant about coming back to the Premier League. As I say, we all know he wants to go to Barcelona. But if Atletico completely shut that door, but say, actually, as we were talking about with Enzo Fernandez earlier, do we keep a player who really doesn't want to be here? He's torched his reputation with the fans to some extent. We've seen that in the La Liga game at the weekend. Of course, he scores a few goals and that'll go away. But they may think there's a circumstance here where actually maybe selling to Arsenal is the best course of action.
And the other thing I'd just throw in the mix, and maybe this doesn't work, and I don't know what Craig would think about this, but maybe Alvarez might think the way I get to Barcelona is to go to Arsenal. And I go to Arsenal for a year or 18 months or a couple of years, and then I get to go to Barcelona. He's 26. He's got a bit of time on his side. Of course, this would play out if he was a little bit younger. But I do wonder whether even, and I have no information to this, but I wonder whether even Arsenal could sell that to him and say, look, come to us, give us a couple of years, win the Champions League with us, and then you can go and get your dream move. Just a thought.
I think that's how Arsenal would have to sell it to him, really, because he has got his heart set on going to Barcelona, and the club, his employer, have been steadfast in saying no way. So if he really wants out of that club, and it's been too vitriolic now, I think it's gone too far. You know, you can always heal it with a few goals, but it'll never really go away. You go to your car park to get your car, and they're waiting on you, they're abusing you. It never really goes away once you take this stance. The problem here is when you're selling that move a couple of years down the line is things change. Things change at Barcelona. Hansi Flick may no longer be in the job. Things could change on the sporting front with Deco. So you're always taking that risk. But if you can't get this move to Barca directly pushed through, you may have to take your second option. Now, the concern here for Arsenal would be you're spending a lot of money on a player whose first port of call is not you. That's, what you really want when you sign a player is a player who's desperate to come. And clearly, whilst Arsenal are a great club and a successful team, and they are absolutely going in the right direction, is that ultimately the player, he's their second option. And so, are you getting the player that's got the desire and the desperation that he would have if he goes to Barcelona? There's a lot of nuances within this move that are a bit of a mess, I have to say. But if Arsenal could get him on the premise that James was talking about, with a clause in the contract or whatever it is, that if Barca come back in a year's time, we will honour that move. That could be a way of them getting a very good player into the squad, which will make them even more stronger favourites for the Premier League, which they already are. And it gets him out of a club where clearly he's unhappy and the club are unhappy with him. So it's every day just seems more of a mess. And I just hope for his sake that it all gets sorted out in an amicable way.
Yeah, so that might be an in at Arsenal. We'll wait and see. But on the way out at Arsenal is Gabriel Martinelli, James.
Yeah, been told by Arteta and the senior executives that he's essentially surplus to requirements this season. It's sort of been quite significant. I think that he's not been part of the matchday squad for either the Community Shield winner over Manchester City in Cardiff or the opening Premier League win against Coventry. And Max Downman, look, he's a fantastic talent, but when you're not getting in ahead of a kid who's just got his GCSE results, it's not a great position to be in. And Martinelli, look, I think his career's kind of stalled, really. And I think, as Craig was talking about earlier, it would be something of a shame, I think, if he went to Saudi Arabia. I'd like to see him try and revive his career in a sort of better league, a better quality league. But he's just reached a point, I think, where Arsenal have moved on beyond him. His decision making he's incredibly frustrating as a player who's watched him a lot. He's a very he creates the opportunities through his pace and his speed of thought that he then wastes, and it's that kind of frustration. He almost brings it on himself because he's very dynamic. His acceleration is ferocious, and then he gets into these positions and then he tends to make the wrong decision. Or he's not quite clinical enough when he's in front of goal. And, Mikel Arteta's been quite open about how he wants to improve that forward line. And look, also, we're talking about clubs spending money. Arsenal spent an awful lot of money in the last 3 or 4 years to get themselves into the position that they have, and they need to recoup some of that. I think they've seen some of the other clubs moving towards, as we're talking about, Villa sort of trading models where there are just more transactions. My information has always been that they were going to move a little bit towards that this summer. A record sale remains Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain to Liverpool all those years ago. I can't even remember when that was now, 2017, 16, 17, something like that, which is 35 million. So I I think they're quite pleased to be finally getting some Saudi cash, because they've had their hand up for quite a long time. I remember, funnily enough, I remember being in a briefing once with one of the executives at Arsenal who had pretty much said, somebody had said to him, why are Arsenal not getting any players to move to Saudi? Why is the Saudi interest not coming to the Emirates? And they sort of said, not for the want of trying, as if to sort of say, and I think they had done this. I think they'd actually gone out to meet some of the execs at the clubs in Saudi Arabia to sort of say, hello, we have players too. We're happy to get some of these marked up transfer fees if you're interested. So I think the fact that they're presumably close and that deal will go through now, I think they're finally going to get one over the line, and as I say, smash their own record sale in the process, is a good thing for them. And in the same way, when we were talking about the Alvarez situation, where it feels like there's no good way out now, whatever happens, somebody's going to be disappointed. If he goes to Barcelona, Atletico will be furious. If he goes to Arsenal, they've lost a great player. If he stays, that could be a very toxic situation. I think Martinelli leaving is actually now the best thing for everybody. I think he just needs to go and revive himself and hopefully resume the upward trajectory in his career.
Just to backtrack a little bit, James. The Alvarez situation with Arsenal, there's no desperation from Arsenal in terms of if the deal gets done or the deal doesn't get done, or is this because they're not quite sure about Gyökeres, Havertz, blah, 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 and they feel they need to go to that next level, be it Champions League final, that they feel they need that extra player?
Yeah, I always go back to straight after the Champions League final defeat to PSG. I asked Arteta a fairly mundane question, to be honest, about what he was going to do over the next few days, or how they were going to process it, just what the next few days looked like. And he sort of lucked into this really good answer where he just talked about how we need to show ambition in the market and we need to be quick and decisive and dynamic and all this sort of stuff. And we sort of came out of it thinking, I think that's a bit of a message to people upstairs there and to the supporters to sort of say, we're not going to rest on our laurels here. And everything I've heard since then has been that comment was about the forward line, was that they know they need a little bit of stardust up front. Let's not forget that they bought Gyökeres in last summer as an upgrade on Havertz. And yet what happened when both players were fit at the end of last season? Kai Havertz is starting. He's starting the big games. He starts the Champions League final. And significantly, he starts the Community Shield. He starts the opening weekend of the season. We could have a debate about whether Gyökeres is good enough. I don't want to do him down too much because I think he's a good lad who works hard and he has some quality. But they build him as like the number 9 who's going to win them the title. And okay, they won the league. But he's not that. I don't think he is that. I don't think he's the number 9 who really can be the main man and take them to sort of years of sustained success. And I think they know that too. I think they know that they'll be content, I think, if they go into the season without signing Julian Alvarez. But look, as I say, they've positioned themselves to say, right, if we can get him over the line, he is the absolute game changer. If we don't, we won the title with Gyökeres, with Havertz, with Mikel Merino, who actually did a pretty good job up there once again as a sort of makeshift centre forward and showed again at the World Cup, how good he can be. I think they'll feel they're confident enough to give it another go with that. And something that they have shown in the market actually is they've been prepared to wait for players rather than just sort of panic buy. So I think they'll feel maybe they could get him next summer if they can't get it over the line this summer. But look, cards on the table, if they could get him, they would want to get him now because they know what a transformative signing he could be, I think.
Good stuff. Nice stuff. Thank you, James. Yes, stay up to date with all the latest transfer talk over on our website and stay up to date with the whole Julian Alvarez saga and see how that plays out. So Savio now in, Marmoush to follow as well. This has been a big topic of conversation in the world of transfers and right here on ESPN FC. James, I'm interested to know your own thoughts on this double move.
Okay, well, I think that most people objectively would say that they've overpaid for Savio, but I think there's more going on here than just the two deals. If Tottenham had paid more than 59 million quid for Omar Marmoush, then Eintracht Frankfurt would have been entitled to a sell-on fee. And I don't think it's an accident that the fee for Marmoush is going to be 50 million plus, I think it's 10, of which 5 is pretty much guaranteed as add-ons. So that gets you to 55 million, and that's strangely close, but under the amount that it would then trigger a 15. I think it's 15% the sell-on fee to Eintracht Frankfurt. So I wonder, and I don't know this, but I do wonder whether they've slightly paid a higher fee for Savio to effectively get Marmoush for a lower fee. And that maybe what's going on there is they've tried to do that deal to get it over the line to save City a bit of money going out the other end. So that's just something to maybe think about, and maybe in the fullness of time we might hear a little bit more about that. But, you know, Spurs have had to really... The noises were very, very clear very early on that as soon as they avoided relegation last season, they were going to go big in the market this summer, and clearly they have. I mean, they've spent huge sums, and it's been a real departure from what we're used to seeing from Tottenham under, obviously, the chairmanship of Daniel Levy before he, well, officially left, was essentially kicked out, and the ownership kind of remodelled the hierarchy at the top end of the club. So now it's on De Zerbi, isn't it? I mean, this is very much De Zerbi's Tottenham. He has had a heavy say in this recruitment strategy. I mean, somebody like Savio was somebody that Spurs were looking at prior to De Zerbi coming in. They tried to do that deal last summer but couldn't get it over the line. So they've had some sort of longer-term targets, but none of this has happened without De Zerbi's sort of sign-off. And now it's on him to make it work. I mean, he's... You know, as Craig sort of alluded to, it was a disastrous, I mean, not an awful start for them at Brentford. And while I get the argument that obviously they had a lot of players missing, there were one or two. I mean, Archie Gray was captain, I think he was the youngest ever Tottenham captain, actually, at the weekend. And, you know, they've got a couple of players there who are, you know, coming back from injury. Tonali made his first start. They've got, you know, a couple of players who weren't able to feature. And obviously, you know, the two City boys will come in now, you presume, at the weekend. There was just a fundamental lack of effort and fight about them that I think will scare a few Spurs fans, because that's the sort of thing that's supposed to be behind them. You know, that alarming capitulation and sort of drop off of the basics. Well, that's where you go and get De Zerbi and you sort of consign the last 2 league seasons, if you like, finishing 17th twice, to history, and you say, well, these are the standards we don't accept anymore. And they've had a lot of concerns about the culture in the dressing room and at the club, and I think you've seen in some of the outgoings that's part of the reason why some of those players have gone. Christian Romero is probably near the top of that list. And I think they felt they'd set those standards internally that would make sure that the kind of performance they gave at Brentford was a thing of the past. So, as ever, when you spend this kind of money, quickly the pressure shifts away from the board, who have had to put up with that for years, and rightly so, because you could always argue that Tottenham have prioritised their balance sheet as opposed to their team sheet. You can't really say that about them this summer. They have put their money where their mouth is, and now it's on the manager to mould a team and to get them up the table. And I think everybody will be looking at that Brentford performance and think, well, they've got to leave that an incredibly long way behind very, very quickly. Otherwise, as mad as it is to say it, De Zerbi does start to come under a bit of pressure, because that's the knock-on effect of such a big spend.
This is the perfect way back into bouncing back, though, isn't it? Against
well, it's only one game, but I did say
win.
it's only one game, but I did say at the weekend, if Igor Tudor had been in charge of that team, you wouldn't have been surprised. That's how sort of rudderless they looked. In fact, Roberto De Zerbi on the touchline, as every goal went in, looked dumbfounded. Now, as Stevie and I were talking about it, I don't know what the reaction was, because generally when you have a performance like that, the manager tears strips off you. But I don't know where we are with this Tottenham team. I don't know, and we know De Zerbi's that kind of character. Look, Spurs have been a big surprise for me because of all the things James talked about, because they've not done what they've done this summer for a long, maybe not even ever. I thought they would have had a manager like they did have an Antonio Conte, similar to De Zerbi, who bangs his fists, who's demonstrative, who demands. But Spurs, and the hierarchy has changed, Spurs have never really buckled to those demands. They've tampered with it a little bit, kind of half-heartedly. But they've never gone in, to my knowledge, certainly in recent history, they've never gone in this manner. So they've secured safety, just. They secured De Zerbi on a long contract. They've gone out and spent, and now it's up to them. They don't need the weak players, the weak mentality that they've had over the past couple of seasons that we saw at Brentford at the weekend. And one of the things with Marmoush and Savio coming in, and one or two other players, is they are very talented players. But do they have the backbone? Has he got enough players with the backbone to drive the others forward? That's going to be one of the big questions, because I've signed a lot of talented guys, but talent alone doesn't get you to the end game. It's an exciting time, apart from Brentford, it's an exciting time for Tottenham, but he now, as James said, he's under pressure. We've spent big, now he has to mould this group into a team that can push for the top six. They have to be pushing for the top six, even though they were where they were last year. You spend that kind of money at a club the size of Tottenham, with that stadium, with this squad and this manager, you have to be pushing up to the top end of the table. And what we saw at the weekend was a million miles from that.
They're also said to be pushing for Cody Gakpo right now. He's emerged as one of the major storylines in this final days of the transfer windows. Man City apparently entering the picture too. What do you know about this, James?
Yeah, not loads. I know that the interest is genuine, and I know that the wide left position is something that Spurs have been looking at for quite some time. And again, my understanding was that De Zerbi had told them earlier in the summer that he wanted multiple wingers. So there's a lot there that fits. And yeah, you know, Gakpo again is does he take Spurs to another level? Probably not. But he knows the league. He has a level of quality and consistency that I think Spurs would probably, I guess, rate him as an upgrade on. But I don't know. I mean, you know, sort of Craig's point, I think, is right about the character. I always remember speaking to a couple of people at Spurs when Thomas Frank was there, and Frank and his coaching staff were quite critical about the lack of leadership that they had in the group. And I always got the sense that when he picked Christian Romero as captain, it was almost as if, who else do I go for? You know, like this, the dressing room is not full of those characters, full of those leaders. And I thought it was really interesting knowing that, to then see De Zerbi say, my five captains, Mickey van der Ven is now obviously club captain, Pedro Porro, Ben Davies, James Maddison and Archie Gray. And every single one of those players was there last season. And you sort of think, well, what has De Zerbi seen in that group that Thomas Frank didn't? You know, what has he seen about the characters in the dressing room? And I'm sort of stunned that Andy Robertson is not in that group, because again, the sort of talk about the reason why they would sign a player like that is because of his character, great leadership qualities, speaks really well to the press. You know, you would think if you're going to name five, he would have been nailed on for that, and he wasn't. And again, I'm not casting any aspersions over anybody. I'm trying to give a bit of information about the view of that squad previously, and the fact that De Zerbi's seen something different there is something I think to keep in mind as the next 2, 3, 4 months go by. You know, was Thomas Frank and his coaching staff wrong? Was there actually a leadership group there all along? Or is De Zerbi placing his faith in a group of players that let the last guy down and may let him down too? Who knows?
I'm glad it was a lot more simplistic. A leadership group back in the day was just we called them senior players who ran the dressing room. And then, you know, if you were a youngster coming through, you listened. You know, Archie Gray's a terrific young talent, but I've never heard him speak. Never, you know, so again, it goes back to the point. Tottenham barely got out of the relegation last year because they had a squad of players who didn't think or didn't even believe they deserved to be down there, and didn't have the mentality or the fight that you need when you're in a relegation battle. They had the talent, but they didn't have the other facets that you need, which is rolling your sleeves up. And you need a bit, and every team needs that. And I look at the players that have signed even in the middle of the park, and as experienced as he is, I wouldn't call Tonali a leader. You know, but he had Guimarães and he had Joe Linton beside him at Newcastle for long periods. You know, one very, very experienced sitting in front of the back four, and the other one a bit of a warrior, really, in Joe Linton that can do multiple jobs. So you look even at that position and you say, well, Rodrigo Bentancur should be a player he's not a leader. In fact, a lot of times he's a liability, the way that he charges around the field, a guy with so much experience and ability. And yet, if I was in the middle of the park, and I was saying this to Stevie, if I was in the middle of the park with Bentancur, I would be getting him by the scruff of the neck and saying, listen, you know, you need to be here beside me, not charging around, getting yourself booked and making all these. And so you need, regardless of the talent that you sign, it all comes down to the fact that you need players within your team that can see the game and can talk and can organise. And that's going to be one of the several big questions for Tottenham and De Zerbi going forward, because I would question if they have that kind of individual within this locker room at this moment in time. I don't think they have. They've signed a lot of good players, but I don't think they've got a lot of, again, to go back to that point, I don't think they've got a lot of leadership.
On the Cody Gakpo point.
I think Stevie was talking about it the other night. Unless Liverpool have got a Barcola or others up their sleeve, they're not really in a position to be letting a guy go that's pretty consistent for them. You know, he did have a period last year he didn't play particularly well, but a lot of times when you watch him play, you know, he's one of the things that, you know, as James mentioned, he would beef up the Tottenham squad, which is one of the things you have to have these days in most leagues, but particularly the Premier League. So one of the things Arsenal really worked hard on was they had a good first 11 and those couple of seasons that they went toe-to-toe with City but lost, but they beefed the squad up because Arteta knew that he needed to be able to go to the bench when somebody wasn't playing well or he had a suspension or an injury. And Tottenham absolutely need that. And I think Gakpo comes into that, he comes into that, you know, place where he'll get you some goals, he'll work hard, he's got some physicality about him, but he won't probably always play, but he'll be a big part of the squad. The one thing I would say, if Liverpool sell him, they have to have somebody lined up. Otherwise, Areola's been left high and dry, because he was ultimately one of their best performers at Newcastle at the weekend.
Real Madrid back at home, and it was a big win. It all pretty much came about in the second half, 4-1. So we saw big 45 minutes, and it feels like it was 45 minutes in Jose Mourinho's post-match press conference, Alex Kirkland. We sent you to it. I kept looking up out the corner, and I'm thinking, is Jose Mourinho still speaking? How long was it?
Over 20 minutes, Kay. I was timing it from start to finish, just over 20 minutes. Look, in keeping with the new sort of relaxed mood that we've seen so far, at least, you know, answering every question, quite discursive. He was happy with that second half, as you mentioned. He also said he was kind of happy with the first half. He said, in the way the team kind of stayed calm, didn't panic, kept at it. As you might expect, lots of talk about Mbappe after his hat-trick. He said he's liked what he's seen from Mbappe, not just the goals that he scored, but also kind of the role that he's taking on within the group, taking responsibility, being a leader, came back early from his post-World Cup holiday, wants to see a lot more from him. He said didn't have a problem with the whistles in the first half. There were a few whistles in the first half when it was goalless, when it was 1-0. He said, look, we know what the Bernabeu is like, the fans are like, they have high expectations. That expectation is built on history, on the trophies won, and he said in a way it can help you to maintain those standards. So yeah, a long press conference, but a relaxed one as well from Mourinho tonight. All right,
so good times rolling right now at Real Madrid with back-to-back wins, but the drama is around the whole Julian Alvarez situation right now. Joan Laporta, the Barcelona president, has said, we got the information that Atletico Madrid wants to sell the player. It's clear that our offer remains valid until the end of the market. Atleti are emphatic in their response. They say the player is being victimised, but the only victim of the Julian case is us. They have harmed us economically and socially. There is 0% chance of selling him to Barca. This situation is not about the money, it's about dignity. There is 0% chance of selling it to Barca. There's a campaign with many lies and half-truths. The only one who pays for this is Atletico. Oh, this is getting uglier still, Alex.
It is, and it comes, of course, after Julian didn't train today. I asked the club about this when we found out that he hadn't been training. He was, well, indisposed is the literal translation of the Spanish, indispuesto. But you can translate it as unwell if you want, had a bad night. That sort of kicked things off. And then, as you mentioned, Laporta's statement followed by the riposte from Atletico. It is getting pretty ugly. It's getting incredibly uncomfortable. And I have to say, increasingly, I find it hard to see how Julian can stay at Atletico under these circumstances. It's getting really quite toxic between his camp and the club. You know, the club, we know how they feel about Barcelona, not happy with the players' representatives either. Look, we've seen all kinds of turnarounds in football, and sometimes players have to sort of get their heads down and work things out. But I do think it's difficult right now to see how he stays. As you heard there, you know, there's a 0% chance of him joining Barca. Is he willing to accept not going to his dream club, but going somewhere else, going to the Premier League? That remains to be seen. But yeah, ugly is the word for the situation right now.
Okay, let's talk about Barcelona, because they're in action against Athletic Club tomorrow, and we did see a good start for Hansi Flick's men. Lamine Yamal, though, not in the best of moods there. Has there been any talk about that, Alex?
Yeah, there has, and about lots of speculation about the possible reasons. Is he not happy with his personal form? Is it, in terms of potential exits or players that haven't really been involved in the first team so far this season? One or two of Lamine's close friends, speculation about Alejandro Balde, who's a close friend of Lamine. Hansi Flick's been talking about him today. He said that he spoke to Balde and said, look, potentially you'll be starting behind João Cancelo at left back, but if you get your head down and work hard, we can see. So some talk that maybe Lamine is not totally happy with the roles of one or two of his close friends in terms of the team. I think it'll turn around soon enough if Lamine feels his personal form is where it needs to be and Barcelona keep winning games and he keeps being important.
Well, that would be a worry, wouldn't it? If he is... You always have people in the dressing room you're closer to, but it's really up to the manager to select the team. You've got your own... If this is the case, he's got to concentrate on what he does, not worry about if his mate's playing there, if his mate's getting enough game time. That's not his job. His job's to do what Lamine Yamal has been doing. But let's not forget, he had a bad injury to finish the season. Spain won the World Cup without him being brilliant. He's got to get his head back down. I'm sure he will. He's got to get his head back down. He's working for a manager that trusts him. He's working for a manager that has had success. They play the best football in Spain. He's got everything laid out in front of him. It's up to him to go and do what he does and let the coaching staff do the tactics and select the team. If you start getting involved and worrying about what's happening with, Joe Bloggs and his mate, then that's going to take you off your game. So I would hope that that's just a rumour and that, he's a little frustrated at the moment because he does not want to start meddling in who plays where and when, because that is not his job.
Yeah, we can see how Barcelona look tomorrow when they take on Athletic Club, and you can too by catching us. The game will be on ESPN2, 2:55 p.m. Eastern, also on Deportes, but pre-game coming to you on the app, so make sure to join from 2:30 Eastern for all the build-up to Barca against Athletic. That's all we've got time for.
Well, as you lied tonight.
ESPN
You lied. You said it'd be a short show. You said 25 minutes in and out, but you were blabbing on. You and James.
So much,
you and James.
Never stopped, and we're going to continue talking. And Alex Kirkland's coming back too, because Extra Time's coming up.
I'm not
next.
talking about Alvarez.
Welcome into the latest edition of Extra Time. Alex Kirkland is with us from outside the Bernabeu, and Craig Burley.
You get these transfers that come along now and again. After a couple of days, you're just sick of it. Alvarez feels like that because it's a mess, isn't it?
It's not the Mbappe 3-year one, though.
No, but it's a mess, and I don't know. It never ends well. Put it that way. Really.
Okay. First question. After Manchester United's loss to Hull City, Michael Carrick got a bit hot under the collar at Jan Åge Fjørtof's post-match questions. Was Carrick in the wrong, or is it just how everyone reacts to Jan asking them questions? He did get a little bit prickly, didn't he, with Jan?
Well, look. Is he in the wrong? No. That's his choice to react in that way.
Jan suggested that there was no passion from his team in the first half.
And usually a manager at the end of a game is running hot under the collar anyway, particularly one who just witnessed a performance like Carrick had. So, yeah. Do I think he could have been a little smarter in how he answered the question? Yeah. Well, that's what... And like, fair play to Jan for keep badgering away. So, yeah, look, sometimes that happens.
OK. Alex, you've seen it. What did you think of it?
I saw this. I loved it, Kay. Look, as someone who does quite a lot of these post-match flash interviews, they're so often so formulaic and so often, let's be honest, just kind of generic questions and answers. I think anytime we get a bit of passion, a bit of back and forth, a bit of debate, I love it. More of this kind of thing, please.
Yeah, there's more passion from Carrick than his team. But boom.
Yeah, Carrick said it was ridiculous. He said, you played, didn't you, to Jan? So we'll see how that plays out.
Well, at least he knew Jan played, unlike Jurgen Klopp when he never knew Nathan played, and then found out
Did
and
he
was
play?
a bit embarrassed.
Alex, how well is Bouadi suited for the Premier League, and can he make a difference for Manchester City this season?
It's a good question. I mean, look, replacing Rodri and filling those boots of the best midfielder in the world right now, a Ballon d'Or winner, it's not easy. It's not ideal. I think, let's see. I saw him at the World Cup. I know that he got a lot of plaudits for his performances early on, in particular at the World Cup. When I saw him later on, it was the game against Canada. I wasn't hugely impressed. He looks quite raw to me as someone who hasn't seen much of him or any of him really in playing in France. So look, let's not rush to judgment and give him time, because I think he'll need it.
Craig, do you think that players are still carrying with them fatigue from the Club World Cup?
The Club World
Club
Cup?
World Cup, it says here.
No, I mean...
To then go a full season and then a World Cup.
Well, it certainly doesn't help, but the World Cup was the one for most of the players, wasn't it? You know, having had the fortune of playing in the World Cup myself and knowing how little time there was off the back of it before we started the season again at Celtic, a season which was a big season for us because we were trying to retain the league title. A lot of guys just picked up muscle injuries within a couple of months of the season, and lo and behold, it was most of the guys that had been at the World Cup for different countries. So yeah, it is, whether it's the whole club, well, the whole Club World Cup thing feeds into the Gianni Infantino whole narrative, and I don't want to go there, but the whole thing, and this was my problem with it, was having something as big as that ahead of a season, a full season for all these players, ahead of a World Cup, is just complete nonsense, isn't it? So I wouldn't say it's still affecting the players, but I think the World Cup certainly is affecting some of the players at the moment.
This person does often send you questions about the Club World Cup. I think they know you love it.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, tell me somebody that thinks it's a fantastic idea to play all these games and you know, make the players, you know, even more fatigued. It's just bonkers. And
Right.
hopefully we get this Infantino, which I don't. It seems to have gone a bit quiet, but hopefully somebody will oust this guy and we can move on to a little bit more common sense. But I'm kind of slightly worried that he'll cling on through some sort of power struggle. That's a different story.
Craig, how disappointing is it that Celtic lost to Lask yesterday in their
Disappointing
second leg
for me,
Champions
I don't know,
League
but
playoff?
disappointing for the Celtic supporters. I
4-goal advantage.
don't pay any attention to it these days. But yeah, it's embarrassing actually, isn't it? I mean, Rangers got walloped, I think. Hearts went through tonight in the conference, I think it was, whatever it was, against Rapid Vienna. But to be 4 up, I think it was, did you say, I think 4 goals to the good over the 2 legs and then lose 5 goals is not a good look, but you know, you dominate Scottish football for the most part and rest in your laurels. That's what you get.
Okay. Don't think we have Alex for the moment, so we're going to... Oh, we've got him back. Right, yep, nope. Yeah, we do. Good, because we've got a nice question for you, Alex. How short is Dan Thomas in person? We saw a picture of Dan taking a picture of you, and he had to hold the camera up to get you in the frame. I think we've got that picture. There it is. Tell us, Alex.
Yeah. Look, it's often the case when you meet celebrities, when you meet famous people, they're not as tall as you expect, are they? And that's the case. Look, that photo, the perspective is not flattering to Dan. There's a bit of a slope on the edge of the pitch, which doesn't help. But the facts are the facts.
I think that is actually flattering to Dan. I think it doesn't look as bad as really it should be. I think if he was actually going and stand right next to Alex, it would be a much poorer. It'd be a much poorer look. Look, we all know he's vertically challenged. I mean, there's no getting away from that. I mean, it's been quite obvious from probably day dot. But there you go. You know, it takes all sorts.
Yeah, he's got his friends in Madrid to cut Alex's feed off so that Alex can't talk more about it. Sorry, Alex. But Craig, good job.
Well, he's coming back to work, I think, tomorrow. I think, isn't he, Billy Big Time?
He is.
And travelling around.
Craig, following on from your previous shark-based words of wisdom, Dan shared this.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any other noteworthy pieces of advice? So first, let's remind you.
Remember this and you'll stand you in good stead.
Yeah.
A shark will only attack you when you wet.
Right, good.
So if you keep that... What?
Yeah, don't. Oh,
A shark, Don, listen, because you're not the brightest. A shark will only attack you when you're wet. Now, if you keep...
When you're wet?
Yeah. A shark will only attack you when you're wet.
Okay, right.
What? Do you understand
extra
that?
time. Extra time.
Don, what's not to understand about that?
Don's face.
What? When you're wet?
A shark. I'm trying to help you here. Stay dry. Stay dry.
He will die.
A shark won't attack
Stay
you.
dry. Stay dry in the ocean. Yeah, good luck with that one.
Alex is back. Alex, you understand, right? Please tell us.
Again, I've seen the clip and I enjoyed it very much. It's great stuff. It's terrific
Well,
content.
I actually stole it, Alex. Well, it's not my line. I heard it from the late, great Sean Locke, the English brilliant comedian who passed away, I think, a couple of years ago. And I heard him, so I pilfered it from him, really, because obviously I'm not a comedian. But I just loved that line. But it's not really about that. It's Don, isn't it? It's Don and Shaka. Don and Shaka make the clip.
Shaka off camera, you can hear.
Well, you know Shaka, he could laughs and Don with that sort of that made it. But I have no other advice at this
No
moment
words
in
of
time.
wisdom.
No.
What a shame. Well, maybe next time Don comes on, you can have some ready for him.
I did laugh when I heard that the first time, the comedian Sean Locke. A shark will only attack you when you're wet.
What? Don. Brilliant. OK, Craig, since Stevie has agreed to go to yoga class if Manchester United win their next two games... Yes, Stevie and Alexis had a bet that if Manchester United win their next two games, they'll go to a yoga class together.
Well, obviously there'll be a camera.
Will you? Absolutely. Will you buy him some yoga pants? Can you imagine Stevie in a pair of yoga pants?
Well, as we know...
Do you want to imagine
I'd love him... As we know, Stephen, our colleague, has... I wouldn't call it a problem. A flatulence problem.
Yoga is not good for that.
I think that could be a worry for the other participants in this possible yoga event because Mr. Nico... Let's just leave it there.
Yeah, have you ever
Why
done...
does he go into these bets?
I don't know. Have you ever done a little tree pose? Little downward dog, Alex?
I do a bit of yoga. I do it with my kids. My kids love it. We stick some kids yoga on YouTube on the TV screen in the living room, and we do it together. Yeah, it's good fun.
I don't do it, but it's actually supposed to be really, really good for you, particularly in my scenario where I've got a lot of issues with my pelvis from my playing days. It's very locked and stiff. And it is actually, however, I think he is past that stage.
Why don't you join them if it happens?
No, I've no interest. But I actually think, anyway, it's supposed to. That'll be the next thing. He's cut back on he's cut back. He's on a diet. He's cut back on his beer. He's taken up yoga. Is this the new Stephen Nichol?
Yeah, he actually has been saying no to some things that he'd usually not to. So he's really reining it in on the diet.
All right.
Yoga, we'll see.
It's late in Madrid. It's gone 12 p.m.
It is. Thanks so much for being with us, Alex.
Kids are in bed.
Go get some rest. Great work as always.
No worries, guys. Thank you.
We'll be back tomorrow. ESPN FC. Make sure you are.